Every Thursday from here on out, I'm going to pop up a video just going through a topic or topics that are hopefully going to help you succeed with your training. Doesn't necessarily even have to be in regards to training. If you want my thoughts on anything, feel free to hit me up, send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. If you're already part of our community, please feel free to pop a post up in the Facebook group, or alternatively pop a comment on this YouTube video, and I will get around to your questions. But what I'm planning on going through today, and the topic that I want to address, and it's probably something that a lot of our members here, or anybody that's taken a class with me, especially in the last little while, is probably getting a little sick of me addressing it. It's attention to detail. And I'm going to talk more about attention to detail as it pertains to your training, but it's obviously important to have attention to detail with everything that you do, because you can find that things can slip through the cracks and we're probably not quite getting what we need to out of certain things, because sometimes we're just lacking that last little 1% that we need to utilize or we need to address before we can move on to the next point. But why you need attention to detail in your training is because you will find that you get to a point sometimes where you stall, whether it be something like your Olympic lifts or it may even be heavier compound lifts, and sometimes it's due to the fact that there was a piece missing in the preparation, in the lead up, and that all ties back into that attention to detail. The other thing is, when it comes to movement prep and warm up and being part of your training and doing things well, by having a really fine attention to detail, it will help prevent your risk of injury when it comes to training. Now, let me use a little bit of an example, and this is just one in a whole list of examples I could potentially use, but for people who are on one of our programs or who have done one of our warm-ups that we do, we tend to use the Spider-Man sequence quite a bit in our warm-up. One thing I see very commonly when people do that warm-up, when you get to the second to last position, where you pick both those hands up off the ground and your torso's upright, letting that back foot turn and letting that heel hit the ground for a lot of people is easy, rather than just keeping that heel up off the ground while you go through that movement. I mean, that's a fairly easy bit of attention to detail that sometimes gets lost when people are doing their warm-up. As a result, if we don't address that, you're looking at not getting that glute activation as part of the movement. You then go on to squat, and there can be a knock-on effect from what you get out of your squats for that day, and so on and so forth. And that cumulative effect over time of missing that little piece then can become an issue from the point of view of A, progress, or B, creating an imbalance which can then go on and cause you an injury. And there's so many instances of lacking that finite attention to detail that we need in order to make sure that we're doing things properly. And some of the reasoning for people doing that and missing that attention to detail is pretty poor. If it's a case of you're not, let's use that same example, you're not able to do it because you literally can't hold that position because we maybe don't have the musculature there, or we're just unable to, then let us help you get into a position that's going to give you the same stimulus. But that's a very small percentage of people that are actually just not able to do it. Most of the time, it comes down to either A, ego, or B, laziness. Okay, ego for us and for what we do, especially in the group fitness class, when it comes to attention to detail, ego comes out a lot more when we start doing workouts and we start, doing things for time or trying to get an amount of reps out in an AMRAP, and sometimes people find that it's easier to move a particular way and lose a particular point that they're trying to achieve just so they can move faster, just so they can get a better score. Little things like, again, I'll use another example. If we're trying to do a pull-up and we want to try and keep those shoulders locked back and down and get that good scapular and lat engagement and try and minimize any internal rotation as we pull, most people will find that they're a fair bit stronger in an overextended position with that internal rotation. So you get into a workout environment and we're able to do that quicker. Whereas if we just slowed it down, we'd be doing the movement properly and getting the right stimulus out of it. And then what they find is either A, they start to get some injuries throughout their shoulders, we start to get little niggles and aches and pains. Or the other thing is, when it comes to moving from a scaling option and moving to actually doing the full variation of the movement, they're not able to progress because they're missing that attention to detail within the movement. So that's an instance where ego has just gotten out of control and we need to put it aside. We need to do the scaled variation of the movement well, slow it down and really focus on those finer points, because long term that's going to be much better for us. The laziness thing and the lack of interest thing, I tend to find that comes in a lot more within a warm-up, right? It doesn't necessarily pertain to when people get into the workout side of things. The workout side of things is more an ego-driven thing, and it's I want to keep up with that person, or even I want to beat myself from last time, even though last time you were doing the movement subpar and it wasn't up to the standard that you should all be holding yourself accountable to, having the discipline to make sure that you maintain a high level of movement. The laziness thing is one of those things that I see a lot in the warm-up. Like the instance that we mentioned earlier, with the Spider-Man sequence, it happens all the time. It happens with dead bugs, maybe if you're at the point where you can do a dead bug with a straight leg and a locked knee, you're not quite using that time as best you can to do it. You're getting a little bit lazy because, it's a little bit easier for me to do it this way. Whereas you might struggle, but that progression as you move through is going to happen if you push yourself a little bit more. So attention to detail is so important in training. It's so important in a lot of aspects of life. But as it pertains to your training, you are really hindering your long-term progress and you are setting yourself up for a potential injury if you don't hold yourself accountable and have that discipline to really, really focus on and do those finer things properly. Thank you very much. I hope you got something out of it. Again, hit me up with your questions if you've got any, and we will address them next week. Thanks.